When the gang leader pointed his gun at the children's heads, you'd think everyone's heart would stop. But Frank Miller's heart slowed down. His breathing steadied. His hands stopped shaking. Because for Frank, this wasn't a new situation. This was the same moment he'd lived through hundreds of times in Iraq, and he would do anything for those kids. Welcome to Hidden Warriors. Before we tell you the story of the bus driver who became a guardian angel, let me know in the comments, where are you watching from today? And if you believe stories like this deserve to be remembered, hit that subscribe button and help us honor the protectors who keep our children safe. School bus route 47 started every morning at 6:45 a.m. sharp. Frank Miller had been driving it for 15 years, picking up the same families, watching kids grow from kindergarten through high school graduation. At 52, Frank was the kind of bus driver parents trusted completely. Patient, careful, and genuinely fond of the children in his care. Frank stood 6 feet tall with graying hair, kept military short, and shoulders that stayed square despite decades of civilian life. He wore the same navy blue uniform every day, with Pine Valley School District embroidered above the pocket and his name badge polished to a shine. His bus was spotless, his routes were timed to the minute, and his safety record was perfect. The kids loved him. Frank knew every child's name, remembered their birthdays, and played their favorite songs on the radio. 7-year-old Emma always sat in the front seat, chattering about her drawings and school projects. 10-year-old Marcus saved his best jokes for the morning ride. The teenage kids in the back trusted Frank to keep their secrets and respected him enough to follow his rules. But Frank had habits that didn't quite fit the typical school bus driver profile. He positioned his mirrors to scan not just traffic, but potential threats. He varied his routes slightly each day, never following exactly the same pattern. And when he walked around his bus for the pre-trip inspection, his eyes moved like someone trained to spot dangers others would miss. The Medal of Honor in his bedroom dresser stayed hidden behind old bus route schedules. Had been hidden for 20 years. Frank Miller had been Staff Sergeant Frank Miller, United States Marine Corps, 1st Battalion, 8th Marines. Scout sniper. 3 tours in Iraq, 2 in Afghanistan. 186 confirmed kills and dozens of American lives saved from impossible distances. Tuesday, October 15th, started like every other school day. Frank completed his pre-trip inspection at 6:30, started his route at 6:45, and began picking up his kids. The fall weather was perfect. Clear skies, good visibility, no traffic delays. Emma climbed aboard at stop number 3, her backpack bigger than she was, chattering about the spelling test she'd studied for all weekend. Marcus got on at stop 7 with a new riddle that made Frank groan and smile at the same time. By stop 12, Frank had 38 kids on board, ranging from kindergarten through 8th grade. The morning was routine, comfortable, exactly the way Frank liked it. Classical music played softly on the radio, Frank's compromise between the kids who wanted pop music and his own preference for something that wouldn't distract him from driving. The children talked and laughed, did last-minute homework, and enjoyed the social time that made the bus ride as important as the destination. Frank turned onto Maple Street for the final approach to Pine Valley Elementary. 2 more stops, then the middle school drop-off, and his morning route would be complete. He'd driven this exact path 2,847 times over 15 years. He knew every pothole, every stop sign, every house where a dog might run into the street. That's why he noticed the black SUV immediately. It was parked in the wrong place, positioned to block the intersection ahead. The windows were tinted too dark for a family vehicle, and it sat too low for normal cargo. Frank's instincts, dormant for 2 decades, suddenly screamed to life. Frank slowed the bus gradually, not wanting to alarm the children, but needing time to assess the situation. His trained eyes swept the area systematically. Rooftops, parked cars, potential escape routes. What he saw made his blood run cold. 3 men emerged from the SUV, moving with coordination that spoke of planning and practice. They wore dark clothing and ski masks, and they carried weapons with the casual familiarity of people who'd used them before. This wasn't random. This was an operation. The lead man raised his hand, signaling Frank to stop the bus. The other two spread out, flanking positions that would control the road in both directions. Frank recognized the formation immediately. Classic ambush setup, designed to eliminate escape routes and establish control. In the back of the bus, the older kids were starting to notice something was wrong. The chatter died down as they saw Frank's reflection in the rearview mirror, his expression suddenly serious, alert in a way they'd never seen before. "Mr. Frank," Emma asked from the front seat, "why are we stopping?" Frank's mind was racing through possibilities, calculating angles and distances with precision he hadn't used in 20 years. The lead gunman was approaching the bus door, weapon visible but not yet raised. The others maintained their positions, watching for threats from the outside. Frank knew exactly what this was. Child abduction, probably for ransom. The wealthy families on his route made their kids obvious targets, and an isolated school bus represented 40 potential hostages with minimal security. But they'd made one critical error in their planning. They'd assumed Frank Miller was just a bus driver. The leader banged on the bus door with the barrel of his gun. "Open up!" "Now." Frank looked at the children in his mirror. 38 faces, ranging from 7 to 14 years old. Emma was clutching her backpack like a shield. Marcus had gone pale. The teenagers in the back were reaching for their phones, but Frank knew help was too far away. "Kids," Frank said quietly, his voice carrying an authority they'd never heard before. "I need you to get down between the seats. Right now. Stay low, stay quiet, and no matter what happens, don't look up until I tell you." Something in his tone made every child obey instantly. Even the rebellious 8th graders dropped to the floor without question. Frank opened the bus door and stepped out, hands visible, moving slowly. The leader smiled behind his mask, thinking he was dealing with a cooperative civilian. "Smart man," the gunman said. "Now get those kids off the bus, nice and easy. Nobody gets hurt if you—" That's when Frank moved. 20 years of civilian life hadn't erased muscle memory that had been drilled into him through thousands of hours of training. Frank's hand shot out, grabbing the gunman's weapon and twisting it away, in a move so fast the man barely registered what happened. A precise strike to the throat dropped him instantly. The second gunman, 30 feet away, was raising his weapon when Frank dove behind the bus's front wheel. From his position, Frank could see both remaining threats while staying protected. This was exactly the kind of tactical situation he'd trained for, fought in, and survived dozens of times. But this time, it wasn't fellow Marines depending on him. It was Emma and Marcus and 36 other children who trusted him to get them safely to school. Frank assessed the situation with cold professional calculation. 2 active threats, both armed, both trained enough to maintain position despite their leader going down. The children were secure inside the bus, protected by steel walls and below the sight lines. Police response time would be minimum 8 minutes in this suburban area. 8 minutes was too long. Moving with the fluid precision that had made him one of the Corps' most effective scout snipers, Frank used the bus as cover while he closed distance on the second gunman. The man was focused on the spot where Frank had disappeared, expecting him to emerge from the same position. Frank emerged from behind the rear wheels instead, moving in complete silence across the asphalt. The takedown was textbook, arm control, weapon displacement, nerve strike that shut down the threat without permanent injury. 2 down. The third gunman, positioned across the street, finally understood this wasn't going according to plan. He raised his weapon toward the bus, toward the children, and Frank's world narrowed to a single point of focus. Range, 47 meters. Wind, negligible. Target, moving, armed, immediate threat to civilians. Frank didn't have his M40A3 sniper rifle. He didn't have a spotter. He didn't have backup. What he had was the gunman's dropped pistol and 2 decades of experience making impossible shots when American lives hung in the balance. The shot took less than 2 seconds from acquisition to trigger pull. Center mass, immediate incapacitation, threat neutralized. 3 down, children safe. When the police arrived 4 minutes later, they found 3 unconscious men zip-tied with emergency restraints from the bus's first aid kit, their weapons secured and unloaded. Frank was sitting calmly on the bus steps, radio in hand, giving a precise tactical report to the dispatcher. The children were unharmed, still crouched between the seats where Frank had told them to stay. It wasn't until the all-clear that they looked up to see their bus driver surrounded by police officers, EMTs, and detectives who were treating him with the kind of respect usually reserved for law enforcement professionals. Detective Sarah Chen approached Frank after the scene was secured. "Sir, I need to understand what happened here. This was professional-level tactical response. What's your background?" Frank looked at the bus, where social workers were helping his kids process what they'd experienced. Emma was crying, but unhurt. Marcus was telling anyone who'd listen that Mr. Frank was a superhero. "United States Marine Corps," Frank said quietly. "Scout sniper. Retired. How many years?" 8 years active duty, 20 years driving bus route 47. Detective Chen studied his face. "Sir, you saved 40 lives today. These men were part of a larger operation, kidnapping for ransom, targeting multiple schools. You prevented something that could have been..." She paused. "There are going to be commendations, interviews, media attention." Frank stood up, straightening his Pine Valley School District uniform. "Detective, I just want to get my kids to school. They've been through enough today." But as Frank looked at those 38 faces, his kids, the children he'd protected for 15 years and would protect for as long as they'd let him, he realized something had changed, not just for them, but for him. For the first time in 20 years, Staff Sergeant Frank Miller and bus driver Frank Miller weren't 2 different people. They were the same man, using different skills to serve the same mission, protecting the innocent, serving something bigger than himself, making sure everyone got home safe. Route 47 still runs every morning at 6:45 a.m. sharp. Frank still knows every child's name, still plays their favorite songs, still makes sure everyone buckles their seatbelt. But now the kids also know that their bus driver is someone special, a guardian who would do anything to keep them safe. Because sometimes the most important battles aren't fought in foreign countries against foreign enemies. Sometimes they're fought on suburban streets by ordinary people who refuse to let evil win. And sometimes the most heroic thing you can do is spend 20 years driving children to school, making sure they feel safe and loved and protected, until the day when all that quiet service prepares you for the moment when protection means something more